Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight we are joined by Jacques de Villiers. He is going to talk a bit about NPM and how to publish NPM packages and so forth. I think this is like very topical, specifically. Now that kind of NPM is one of those things that is like just like kind of a given in the world of JavaScript. One thing that I note is that so I do a lot of teaching in the world of JavaScript and web and so forth. And I always see that we keep on moving the node and the NPM modules, or modules like teaching modules, earlier and earlier. I think way back in the day, it used to be something that was kind of at the end. It was like, oh, here's an introduction to NPM and so forth. And it just keeps on creeping closer and closer. And the reason being, it's just like, it's such a like kind of part of just day-to-day JavaScript development in this day and age, like it's almost like you can do very little without actually being able to actually use NPM packages. So what he's going to be doing is he's going to be talking like taking a look at the other side and kind of showing you guys how you can publish your own NPM packages if you want other people to use it and so forth. So I'm just going to try and do some super quick introductions. First and foremost, you're tuned into Frontend Development South Africa. We do these every month where we kind of chat with developers in South Africa, kind of having them share some topics and so forth. And obviously, like these talks are kind of sponsored by our main sponsors, which is NML and IO Digital. So please check them out and support them. And then also it's worth noting that the company that Jacque works for, CodeCapsules, is also like one of our big sponsors. So they are the big driving force behind the hackathon days that we hold. So yeah, like also like thanks to you, Jacque, and also Mickey, who I think is in the text chat. All right, so I just like, as always, I just do a quick shout out in the beginning, just saying that if anyone is keen to maybe do one of these talks, or they have a topic they want to share or so forth, like please reach out to me. We're always super keen for people to kind of share. So how this is going to run tonight is Jacque is just going to continue. He's going to like share his screen. He's going to share a bit about kind of like his journey in terms of publishing NPM packages and how you go about that. And then please, any text questions in the text chat, then I will just stop him if any questions come up, and kind of I'll just ask it on your behalf, and we can chat about it a bit and so forth. So if at any time during the talk you have any questions, please leave it in the text chat, and then we can just kind of address it as it comes up. So yeah, I am more than happy to give over to Jacque, have him do a bit of an introduction, tell a bit about himself and the topic that he's going to be talking about tonight. So Jacque, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Skulk. And thanks so much for having me, everybody. I'm glad to be here, happy to be here, and looking forward to share some of my experience writing NPM packages. So yeah, just a little bit about me. First and foremost, I'm just a normal person like everybody else. I'm the CTO of CodeCapsules. So that was a venture that Mickey and myself started a couple of years back. And we went live earlier this year, and we've just been progressing and working on that project as well. And actually, during writing part of the CodeCapsules framework, that is where I started writing my own NPM packages and deploying them to make use of microservices and that kind of thing. And we noticed that our team was struggling to implement, or not struggling, our team was implementing these microservices that we had written, but there was always a bit of like integration hell, we would call it that. So writing NPM packages to consume your microservices properly was important to us. Sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there. So just a little bit more about me. I'm CTO of CodeCapsules. I'm a director at Appstrax Technologies, which is another consultancy that we work at. Just why I studied my BSc Computer Science with honors at the University of Johannesburg, and I've been writing software as a professional since 2013. I'm a husband. I'm married, but my loving wife is Farron. I enjoy a good game of blitz chess. So if you want to play some chess against me, then find me on chess.com. Skulk, I hope that we can share these slides at some point with everybody. I do have a link, so then everyone will have links to all of these highlighted sections over here.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome.
Do you have a link for me? Like, you can just give them to, like,
Yeah.
send it to me. I think on the right-hand side, you should see the
Cool.
chat here. You can just, I think there's a private part that you can just send me or something. Yeah.
Cool. Got it.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. Sorry, I went a little bit forward. Oh, and I'm also into trail running. So I'm currently training for UTCT at the end of the month, and that's going to be a big challenge for me. So looking forward to that. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Enough about me. NPM. All of us should know what NPM is at this point, but for all of us that don't, let me just give a quick recap. So NPM is Node Package Manager. That is the Node Package Manager for JavaScript in general. It's managed and maintained by NPM Incorporated. It's the default package manager for the runtime environment node, or the JavaScript runtime environment node. Consists of a command line tool called NPM, and it has an online database of public and private paid for packages called the NPM registry. Now, something to keep in mind there is that NPM's private packages are paid for. So what that means is if you have a company that you would like to have internal private NPM packages, you have to pay for each one of those private packages. If you want to make your packages public, that's cool, it's all free. Sharing open source code is free on NPM. Okay, let's talk a little bit about microservices, and this is where the journey started for us at CodeCapsules and at Appstrax. And just some background about what microservices are. So the concept of a microservice or the microservice architecture is architectural style which structures application as a collection of services and not one monolithic service. So the benefits of microservices is that you have highly maintainable and testable little sections of code in your API and your backend. It's very loosely coupled, and what that means is you can have a team working on a particular microservice and another team working on another microservice, and they are independently deployable. So you can make a small change in one microservice, which will then, if that breaks, it only breaks that small little service, and it doesn't break your whole application, which is really cool. So that's a nice benefit. It's organized around business capabilities. So if you have teams who are specialized in specific areas, they can work in those sections or work on those particular microservices. And typically you would have small teams working on the microservice, which makes it much more easy to distribute your employees in a bigger corporation. So the microservice architecture enables rapid, frequent, and reliable delivery of large complex applications. So some examples of some microservices would be if you've got, for example, like an authentication API. You could just take everything to do with authentication, whack it into a tiny little microservice, and then that little section can be maintained by a small team. Whenever anything to do with authentication changes, you deploy that new microservice along with some NPM package, which will then integrate with your microservice so that the team that's working on the front-end application can very easily upgrade to make use of the new features which were deployed in that microservice. Okay. Let's look at the difference between microservices and monoliths. So this is your more typical architecture where you've got like a single application backend, right? And then your front-end UI with all the business logic and the data layer access. So there are some people who argue that monoliths are better than microservices in that architecture. However, I would argue against that and saying that the microservice architecture is more scalable. I think the monolithic architecture is great for smaller applications, and it's not necessarily required to have microservices on smaller applications, but your applications get quite big. Microservices make a lot of sense. And another cool benefit about microservices is they can be reusable across many applications. So if you want to create your own microservices, you can do so and then use some NPM packages to make it more easily consumable, or make your microservices more easily consumable to the public at large, right? So one of the downsides of microservices is what's known as integration hell. And that is that your one application now needs to integrate with multiple microservices. And the reason that's a problem is because, oh, sorry, let me go wrong way. And the reason that's a problem is because now each microservice might have their own way of integrating with them. So for example, one might use REST, one might use SOAP, one might use all sorts of different architectures, right? So you need to be able to integrate with them independently. And this is a nightmare for developers, right? So what we do to try and combat that is write NPM packages, which will automatically integrate with your service behind the NPM layer, right? So you have your NPM package, which will do all of the integrations part for you. And all you have to do on the UI is you just call JavaScript functions, which makes it a lot simpler to integrate with. And you could argue then that that is even simpler to implement than having your own monolith, where you have your own API with all your endpoints, and then you have to write your own library, your own NPM library in any case to integrate with that. In this case, you could just use a whole bunch of NPM libraries, you call all the functions, and then you automatically integrating with all these services. Okay, so monolith microservices, the different architectures. So we've already discussed it a little bit, but how NPM packages and microservices actually work really well together, because now you can write an NPM package to wrap or consume your microservice, and this will achieve a whole bunch of benefits. Your microservices become easier to integrate with or integrate into your applications. So now, if you want to take your microservice, which is now reusable, you can use it on a whole bunch of different projects, and your NPM package makes it nice and consumable. So you can just NPM install your cool microservice, which then will make it super easy to integrate with some API that you're running. So it will lead to better adoption of your microservice as well. Can lead to better adoption of your microservice because users won't have to directly integrate with all of your API endpoints. They can just install your service and call a function. It's a lot easier. It will speed up development time, obviously, because you don't have to write all of the behind the scenes stuff that is already developed within the NPM package. Save on development costs because save time, save costs. And then it will also decrease on support issues, because if some users or some developers are trying to integrate, Sculpt, sorry, I saw your message about SOAP. Yeah, it has been a long time since we talked about SOAP. So it will decrease your support time. And that's because you've already written the NPM package so that it automatically integrates with your APIs the correct way, right? And then people aren't trying to integrate with your API and then making mistakes and then calling you, sending you emails saying, hey, I did this, why is it not working? You can just say, use the NPM package, it works really well. Okay, cool. So that's the nice cohesion that NPM packages and microservices have with one another. Cool. So let's dive straight into getting started with NPM. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have NPM installed on your computer. And the way that you would do that is you download and install Node.js. Because NPM, or Node Package Manager, is the package manager for Node, or was originally for Node, and now has become for JavaScript in general, it comes bundled with Node.js. So when you install Node, you get NPM, right? So download and install Node.js. There's a link to it. The links on these slides aren't actually working, but there is a link in the slides. You can just click on that and download Node.js. NPM is installed. To validate that NPM is installed, you just type npm-v in your terminal. If you're getting a valid value like 8 point whatever, then you know that it's installed correctly. If you're getting a command unknown, then you know that it's not installed correctly and you might need to add some environmental links to Node or where NPM is installed. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we have an NPM account. Okay, so when you go, well, what you can do is you can just go to npm.js.com/signup, create an account. You'll put in your username and your password, and then that will have created an account for you. In order to publish your own NPM packages, you do need to have an account with NPM. So if you don't have one, go and create one. And then the last thing you need to do before you can start publishing or writing your own NPM packages is you need to sign in your terminal. So open up the terminal on your local machine, type npm login, and this will prompt you for your username and password. It might also prompt you to do two-factor authentication, so it will send you an email with a code. You just enter in that code and then it'll have you logged in. Okay, and now at this point it knows when you run certain commands using npm that you're doing it with your particular user, and then it knows which user is publishing these packages. Okay, so as mentioned a few slides back, npm is a command line tool. That's one of the parts of it, and once you've installed Node.js, you get that command line tool and you can run these npm command lines. And at this point, once you've created your or installed Node, got npm, created your account, typed npm login and logged in, now you're ready to start writing and publishing your own npm packages. Now, how do we get started writing npm packages? This part is actually a little bit tricky. It's not super intuitive on how you do get started. The documentation on npm is great, and I would recommend you can go and read that to find out a little bit more. However, to save everybody a whole lot of time, I've added a link to a GitHub repository where there's already it's kind of like a template where you can just get started from with npm. So it's kind of like a nice TypeScript npm template that will get you going very quickly. And there's a link to it over here in the slides. Things to note about this template is that the template is written using TypeScript. In my opinion, TypeScript is a much better way to write your JavaScript. It will give you can end up with type safety. It will help you prevent errors more before they happen as well with types and that kind of thing. So I prefer writing things in TypeScript. It makes it a little bit easier to use classes as well with your object-oriented programming. So yeah, that's the reason that the template's written using TypeScript. So something else to note about the NPM service or the NPM package is that it has an HTTP service which wraps the fetch library built in, and that can be swapped out for a library like Access if you want to. But one of the things that you do, yeah, you're right, Daniel, it is the way of the Jedi. One of the what was I saying? Sorry, I got distracted there. Oh, one of the things to note when you're writing your own NPM packages is that the less bloat it has, the better. So when you're writing your NPM packages, you can have dependencies on other packages, right? So when somebody NPM installs your package, they will get all of the dependencies for your package as well. The less dependencies you have, the better, because it will just make the user's application more bloaty when they're using your application. So it'll be a bit slower. It will install more libraries. So when they run your code, it will be far longer download times on their front end, all that kind of things. More code isn't necessarily better. So only install the libraries which are absolutely necessary. If you can go without installing or adding the library dependency, that's better. And that's the reason that I wrote this HTTP service in the NPM package template, because fetch comes built into your browser, and yeah, fetch does have its limitations though. So that's why you can swap it out for Axios, because then you can get like streams and that kind of thing included, which fetch doesn't have out of the box. So yeah, it's just a nice little starting point. It's got ES script as well, or ESLint, sorry, built in. So all your lintings there. It's got tests built in, so it uses tests using Jest. Yeah, you basically can just clone the repository or fork the repository, download it, and then, or clone the repository and then start making your changes. So to get started, just fork this repo, update the package.json with your project's details, and then rename. There's an application.service.ts file. Just rename it with the service that you're trying to write, and then yeah, that's about it. And then you can start updating the code to integrate with your microservice. And we'll do an example of this in a little bit, so don't worry if it doesn't make sense right now. Something to note about the values which are in the package.json. So I'm sure we've all worked with package.json in the past, but when you're writing your NPM library, package.json becomes a lot more important, right? So when you deploy or when you publish your NPM package, with your own NPM package, these fields make a big difference, right? So NPM reads these values from your NPM file, or sorry, from your package.json file, and that uses those when deploying or publishing your package. So name, this is the name of your NPM package. So when you go and search for something on NPM, or when you're looking at a particular package on NPM, this is that name. So you obviously cannot use an NPM name which has been used before. Like, I can't go and create my package as Axios. It's already been used. So create a NPM or give a name which hasn't been used before. Otherwise, your NPM won't allow you to be or allow you to deploy. Description. The description field in your package.json file is also what gets viewed when people are searching for your package on NPM. Version. This one's also quite important. So anytime you want to do a new deployment of your package or a new publish of your package, then you need to update the version and then deploy. If you try and deploy a version which is the same as one that's already deployed, then it will say, no, sorry, you can't deploy this version. It already exists on NPM. So when you want to update your package, just bump the version and then publish. We'll look at how we publish in a little bit. Repository. This is another field which is required when you're deploying your packages. All of this is already in the template, all these values, but you would have to change them to suit your particular project that you're working on or the particular NPM library that you want to write. So just update the links to link to your Git repository. All of these values get displayed on NPM. I'm not sure, maybe it'll be best if can I share my screen, Skull, just to show this some of these values on an NPM package?
You should be able to. Do you want to give it a try, and I can see if I can pop it on here?
Let's try. Share screen.
Cool. There you go.
Awesome. Cool. So when you're searching for your packages, remember I was talking about these values that go into your package.json. So I'm going to search for, let's try Axios. So over here, we can see this name over here, Axios, that is the name field. And this promise-based HTTP client for the browsers and Node.js, that value is the description. Okay, so that's the name value, that's the description value in your NPM or your package.json file. So once you've actually reached this file or this NPM package, you can see here there's a link to the repository. That again links to the repository that's specified in your package.json file. There is another value home page over here, and this also links to a value which is in your package.json. There is an issues section. This links to a value in your package.json, and your license also links to a value in your package.json. So all of these values come from package.json. All of these things, the version as well, we discussed that, MIT, issues, this comes from NPM. So again, yeah, name, Git repository, homepage, version, issues, license, all come from package.json. Can we go back to the slides, please, Skulk?
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, slides are sharing.
Thank you. Cool. So I've mentioned a few here, but as we saw now, when you're looking at an NPM or looking at NPM itself, a lot of these values which are in your package.json file actually pull through to be displayed in your listing on NPM, your packages listing. Okay, next thing we need to do is once we've written our library, right? So we've cloned this, we forked the repo that I've added in the slides there. We've changed up all the values in NPM. We've written all of the code that we want to do to integrate with our service, or it doesn't have to integrate with the service per se. It could just add some front-end feature which you want to add. It's very important to test your package before you publish your package. And we can test the packages locally on our local machine before we deploy them. And the way that we do that is inside the repository template, there's an _ tests _ folder under the source folder. And this folder contains all of our tests. Something to note, the reason we want to test our packages before we publish them is because once it's published, it's live, right? And any developers that want to access your package, they will get this newly published code. So it's important to make sure that it works before we publish. You shouldn't publish to test. You should test before you publish. Once you have validated that everything's working correctly, now we publish. Okay. I was not very good when I first started writing NPM packages. The way that I tested them is by publishing and then testing them out in one of my applications. And it's actually not the right way. It breaks test-driven development, which most people agree is a very good practice. And now the test folder are not, if it's not properly populated, then you don't know if your application's working correctly. And what I noticed is a lot of the time you would write a bunch of code, publish it, test it, and realize there's a problem. And then you change the code, publish it, test it, and realize that the code you just changed introduced another problem, and so on. Because it's very difficult to test your application or to test your code without, or like you write your code, and it's very difficult to write code that doesn't have bugs. So always write tests before you publish. The test folder uses the jest library. Again, this is the link to the NPM jest library. So it's a JavaScript testing library, and it's very nice and easy to use. And I've given a link to an example of one of the tests that's in the Git repository. It's just a dummy, like a very basic test, but it's a very useful way to show you how you can use jest. If not, read the jest documentation, and then you can figure out how jest works. It's how jest works. It's not too difficult. It's very similar to a lot of testing frameworks and libraries. Okay, so we've cloned the repository, we've updated the package.json file, we've written all of our own application integrations or our own service integrations, we've tested that our integrations work. Now we're ready to publish our NPM library or our NPM package. So how do we do that? We need to publish our NPM library. This is the last step. There are actually two things we need to do. The first thing, bump your version in the package.json file. If you don't, you'll get rejected. And the last thing you do is in your terminal, you run the command npm publish, and that's it. NPM will take care of the rest. It will take your NPM or the code that you've just written, and it will put it all up on NPM, ready to go. And that is the long and the short of writing your own NPM packages. Okay, so that's a lot of like theory. It's not really theory, it's a lot of like talking. Let's go and look at some examples of how we can do that. So I've put together a mini microservice, and I've called it the Kind Words API. Okay, and all it does is it allows you to write a little message, and that message will then be stored in a database. In this case, it's a Mongo database, and then you can fetch those messages, and then you can delete a message, you can update a message. So it's got the whole crap: create, read, update, and delete in the API. Now, I've also started off by writing a Kind Words NPM package. Okay, so I've got a link to the GitHub repositories which hold each of those two applications, well, the API and then the NPM package itself. And then I've written another application which consumes the NPM package. So the NPM package wraps around the API, and then the Angular application consumes the NPM package, which links you to the API, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've got an Angular application, which is our front end, and this is where we're going to be doing our work. Well, we're going to do a bit of work here, and then test, we'll test it in the tests library or the test section of our NPM package, and then we'll confirm that it's working in our application. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Because we're looking at front-end developers for today, we won't look at the back end. I can just bring up some of the documentation for the back end to see that our integrate, or how we need to integrate, which is what we'll do in the NPM package, and then we'll view it in the Angular application. Now, when integrating with a microservice, you need to have a test API running in order for you to test your NPM package. Okay, and what I would recommend is that you have a staging environment somewhere or a test environment somewhere which allows you to, which is continuously running the most up-to-date version of your API. So if you've got a backend team, then you'd have your backend team always deploy to that test environment or that staging environment, and that will be running the most up-to-date version of the API. Then you'd have your team which is writing the NPM package, and they would then be continually integrating or updating the NPM package to integrate with this test API. So when you run your tests, those tests are integrating with this API. Okay, this is what I'd recommend. There are other ways of doing it, like you can run it locally. The problem is, if you're working with a team and your teammate doesn't have the API running on their local machine, or it's running on a different port, or whatever, there are many different things which could happen, then it's difficult for the tests to run. It always have to update the code of where your API is sitting. So in my opinion, it's best to have a testing environment or a staging environment for your API, and then your NPM package can integrate with that to test that everything works. And then once you're happy that everything is working, you can publish your new version of the NPM package, which means that all other developers using that NPM package will be able to get the latest benefit of your microservice. Okay, so I've got 4 different applications running. The first one, well, 3 different applications running. The first one is the test API, okay, which is running on my staging environment. The second one is my prod API, which is the production version of my kind words API. And the last thing is the Angular application, which is using the NPM package, or integrated with this, or installed this NPM package, and then integrated with the prod API. Okay, and then this link is linking us to the kind words API. So let's go have a look at a bunch of these things. I'm going to go back to screen share if that's okay, Skulk.
Sure, yeah. Cool, there we go.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up the slides here so I can click on these links. First of all, each of these are GitHub repositories. So if you click on these links, all of them are public. You should get access to them. All of this code is available to you if you want to play around with it. Just clone the repo, fork the repo, play around if you want to. All of it is as is, so it's under the MIT license. So if there's anything that's not working, then rather put a pull request or give me an issue so that I can fix it. Okay, so let's look at this API. So I've called it the kind words API. And let's have a look at this. This is running on CodeCapsules. So this is a shameless plug of the product that Mickey and myself have been building over the past while. And if we have a look here, this is this kind words service team. And inside the kind words service team, I've got 2 spaces, my production space and my testing space. They're both running on AWS Cape Town. And if we have a look at this space, we've got 2 capsules inside here. And the one capsule is running the kind words API, and the other capsule is just running a Mongo database. So this kind words API, when it stores data, it stores it to this MongoDB. So I can just click on this, and I can see all of the logs for my application over here. So it's busy running on port 3000, and it's connected to my database. Sweet. So if we go to the details of this API, I can click here. We can see the link. It says cannot get. That's fine, as expected. I've got API-docs. Sorry, that's not it. Docs. Okay, there we go. So this is giving me a nice little Swagger page to show me all of the infrastructure, all of the integrations that I can do. So I've got a /API/sentence. So I've called it kind words API, but it stores sentences. So I've got just a bunch of CRUD for sentences. So if we do get on /API/sentence, this will list, returns an array of all sentences. Okay, if we do post to /API/sentence, this will create a singular sentence. If we want to fetch one sentence, we can do that with /API/sentence/ID for the particular sentence. /API. If we want to update a particular sentence, we can do with patch to /API/sentence/ID. And then if we want to delete a particular API or the particular sentence in my kind words API, same thing, /API/sentence/ID, but we do the delete HTTP call request. Okay, so we know that if we open something up in the browser, then it will do a get. So I'm just going to go /API/sentence. And we can see here that I get a result back as just an array of these elements. This is on the testing API. Okay, great. Now, I will take a look at my NPM package. So we called it kind words. Oops, kind-words. This is the API, or this is the NPM package. You can see it was me that published it. So if we click on here, I didn't actually give enough documentation in the README. So what we see here is the README documentation. Okay, so I didn't finish up getting the getting started documentation, but you should always actually document your NPM packages correctly in the README. I haven't finished that on this one yet. However, we can see that this package wraps the kind words API. Great. Okay, if we go back to CodeCapsules, we can go and look at the production space. And we can see that I've got three capsules over here. The one is running the kind words Angular application. The one is running the kind words API, which is the production version, and also a production database, or MongoDB. So if we have a look at this one, I can click on the kind words app, and we can see that this is now showing me the kind words in my Angular app. And every time I refresh the page, it will give me a random one of my kind words, which has been stored in the DB. Okay, so let's go now look at the NPM package itself. Okay, so in here, this now, if we look at the code, I haven't pushed it up. Here's the code over here. Okay, so this code is now showing me everything to do with that everything to do with the kind words NPM package. Okay, so what I did is I went to the NPM package template. I forked it, right? Over here, I forked the code and I created a new one called kind words package. Okay, and this will show us everything to do, well, it's just like that template, right? It's got everything we need. So it's got a base package.json, it's got my TypeScript config, it's got the jest configuration, it's got a license, it's got a prettier documentation, it's got the ESLint, and it's got the ESLint ignores. Inside the source folder, we have an index file, and this just exports the particular application service that we want to export. Over here, you'd export everything you want to be available to your users in your NPM library. So in source/index, this file exports everything which will be available when people say, when you like import a package in your Angular code or in your front-end code, whatever you're importing comes from this index.ts file. So whatever's exported here is importable by your by the other developers using this template. So I've got this file here called services, and services.ts just stores my HTTP service. Sorry, is this big enough? It wraps my HTTP service, and it has this application service. And I've called it application services, but this is the one that you want to rename for your own application, okay? Services is a singleton. You can see that the construct is private, and when it constructs, it just passes the HTTP service into the application service, and it allows you to get the application service. So you would want to rename this to get whatever service. In my case, we called it kind words, or this API is the kind words API. So I called this the kind words service, and I said that this is must get the kind words service. Okay, so this is what you would want to update once you forked this repository. Over here, this is just some templated code. So I've got an API base URL that must be initialized. So when you initialize your application, you need to pass in the microservice base URL, and then that is stored inside the application service. I've added a to-do here to remind us to rename this service to the service you want to provide. Okay. We have this HTTP service, which is passed in the constructor, which just wraps fetch, as mentioned earlier. I've got a dummy function called perform action, and it's just sort of like an example of a particular kind of function which will be available to your to other developers. So when somebody imports the code, it would look something like this. If we notice here that there are only two public functions, perform action and initialize. Sorry, perform action and initialize. Initialize will allow them to pass in the base URL, and perform action is sort of like the action which would be performed. I've also got a nice little build URL function which will allow you to pass in just the path to your action or your path to your endpoint, and then that will combine your base URL with this path, which will then make it nice and easy for you to use this template. Again, this is just a template. If you don't like anything here, you can just scrap the code and start again. It's just a starting point, a nice starting point, in my opinion. So this is the fetch service. This is the HTTP service, which wraps that. And then let's go back one and go into the tests and just have a look at how that looks. So inside tests, we can see importing from ... means I'm going to be importing from index.ts, which is essentially like saying import from NPM package template, if it were an NPM library. So this could be the same sort of feel as that. So in my test here, I've got an example test file, and we've got an example text instead of test, but that's fine. We all sometimes make mistakes. Okay, so this is the title of the test, and then what you can see here is that it will do a try perform action. We expect this to fail because, let me just open this and show you why it should fail. In my application service, one thing that I've already built into build URL over here, which gets called when we're building up our URL that we want to do the post on, right? We can see if we don't have a base URL, then we throw a new error, please initialize first. So when I try, at this point, I've just got my application service. I don't initialize it, and I just try and perform an action. It should throw an error, and the error should be please initialize first. So this test will pass at this point. But you would go ahead and change all of this stuff in any case. So let's have a look at an example of me forking that repository and changing it to suit my needs. So we've still got index.html. Inside the DTOs file, I know that my sentences look like this, that each of them has an ID, a sentence, which is a string, and then it has a created at and updated at value, which are both dates. Okay, so that's the interface that we'll get back in when I fetch data from my service, okay, or my kind words API. So what I've done now is in services, is this big enough? I hope we can all read it. I'll make it one tick bigger. Okay, cool. So I've renamed application service to kind words service, right? And kind words service is now added or created or initialized, let's say, or instantiated in the constructor of my services class, which is still a singleton. And we pass the HTTP service as a param into the constructor of the kind words service. I also renamed the getter to be get kind words service instead of get application service. Okay, so when we export these items, or what we export in the index.ts file is the kind words service, right? Here we get the instance of services, then I get my kind words service, and that's what I export. So when I'm using my application, I'll say import kind words from kind-words, right? And then I also export the DTO so that people know what type to expect, or they can use it in their application as well. So I import sentence from the DTOs folder as well. Okay, now in the kind word service, now I'm actually implementing my API. Okay, so at this point, we can see initialize stays exactly the same. I pass in the base URL for my service. I use this API or use this base URL when building up my URLs. So once the URL has been initialized, then it gets used over here to build up my URL. So if it's not there, then we ask the user to initialize first. Cool. Now, we've got two other functions. We've got fetch and create. So I've got fetch kind words, which is a function on the kind word service, which just returns an array of sentences. Okay, and all I do is I say build my URL. It must go to API sentence. We already looked at that a little bit earlier. That URL we just pass into the HTTP service, and this will then, it wraps around fetch. So if we want to have a look at how it works, it uses the fetch service. I pass in the get function. You can pass in custom headers if you want to. And then it just wraps around the fetch library, which needs to do a whole bunch of stuff. So like you need to perform the fetch, you need to get the content from the fetch and all that kind of stuff. It's just all wrapped around. I check if it's successful. If it's not, we throw an error. You can look at this code in your own time, validate it. You can, if you want to change it, you can change it as well. It's a nice, easier way. It's much easier to just say this.http.get instead of having to do a whole bunch of other stuff with the fetch library. Okay, so we just say this.http.get, pass in the URL. We know we're going to get back an array of sentences, and there we go. We've wrapped around our one of the functions which is available on our API. Next one, create kind word. So we want to use when we want to do a create, we want to create a sentence. So we pass in the sentence as a string, builds up the URL to post now to the same endpoint. Or it's not the same endpoint, to the same URL, different endpoint because it's a post instead of a get. We post to that URL with sentence as an object, and then that will create a new sentence on the API side. It's stored in the database. Now that will return back to us with an ID, the sentence, it creates that and updates that value. So we get a sentence back, which we know is our DTO, right? So we're going to get all of this stuff back, which is great. Now, notice that I've only got these two functions implemented, and the API, it has full CRUD capabilities. So something else to note, if we go to package.json, I've updated the name of my package to kind words. Oopsie, kind words over here. Now, this kind words name, notice, is the same name as the NPM package. Okay, so the name that's in package.json is the name that will be published on NPM. Your version, notice the version is 0.0.1 on NPM. We have a version of 0.0.1. Okay, you kind of get the picture. It's the MIT license. It's got 0 issues. It's got these two GitHub links. Okay, so I updated the description over here. Something to note there, kind words, API wrapper. So if I were to search for this, kind words API wrapper is the description over there. Okay, good. Repository, you'll just want to update all these values. So in the template, all these values are here. You just need to update them with your particular NPM package's data or values. Okay, so just update all those things and we should be good. All these scripts, they all come with the template. You don't need to write any of them. We've got a build script. So this is, because it's TypeScript, we have to do TSC to build or transpile, I guess, transpile your TypeScript into JavaScript. We've got a test script, which will just do the jest testing. We've got a format function, which will use prettier. If you've got it installed, hopefully you do. We've got the linting function. We've got a prepare function, pre-published function, and a pre-version function. Okay, so we'll get into the scripts in a little bit. We can add keywords for our application, and this will, for our NPM package, and this will just help with the searchability of your package. So if you want to make your package come up a lot easier, just add a bunch of keywords. So then when people search, your package will come up. So add relevant keywords, not a whole bunch. Bugs. So this is the issues link, right? So over here, this issues, it's pulling the issues from here in the GitHub link on my repository, okay? And then lastly, homepage, I've just hit to the README, but when you click on this link over here, homepage, it'll just take you to the README of your repository. Okay, we've got a whole bunch of dev dependencies. Note they're not dependencies, so they're only used for development purposes, and that's the jest types, the ESLinting stuff, the ESLinting parser. Okay, so all of that's to do with ESLint. We've got the jest library itself. We've got a jest fetch mock library. Now this one is because when you run your application over here in the terminal, it's actually running Node.js, and Node.js doesn't have fetch built in. Okay, so we have to mock fetch. It's just a dev dependency, so it doesn't actually go into your NPM library once it's published, but it will allow us to mock fetch so that when we write our tests or when we run our tests, we can use fetch without it complaining, saying it doesn't know what fetch is. Okay, so we've got a mock fetch over here. We just say enable mocks for fetch, and then that gives us fetch mocked when we're running our tests. Cool. JS test and then TypeScript. Cool. So that's really it for the package.json that we need to know about. If you do have some dependencies that you want to add, for example, if you want to write a NPM package which is used in a Node.js application, then obviously you won't use fetch because there's no fetch in Node.js, so you'd use a library like Axios, and then you'll just add a, dependencies over here, and you'd have something like Axios, right? So that would be a dev dependent, not a dev dependency, an actual dependency, which is then installed when your application is installed as well. Okay, cool. So kind word service. Let's quickly go back to our Swagger documentation. So we've done these two, the get and the fetch, and these are the ones that exist already. So let's try and do delete and add delete. Actually, before we do that, I want to quickly take us to the Angular application, which is implementing this NPM package, or which is using the NPM package. So we'll notice here that it's just got regular Angular stuff, but we've got kind words, and that's my NPM library, which I wrote a little bit earlier today. And the kind words library is now installed as a package on this project. So when we use it, so I've got a component over here, and all I do is I import kind words, which is my service, my kind words, hey, very nice. My kind words service, okay? So kind words is an instance of the kind word service, and sentence is just a type, okay? So over here, I can say, when my component is initialized, fetch the kind words. Over here, I just use my kind word service, and I say, fetch kind words, and then I get back a bunch of sentences. Those sentences we now know are going to be of this type, which is cool. So notice how easy it is to use this library compared to having to write all of that code on your own. And this is why it makes sense to write your own NPM libraries, because this is simple to use. Writing all of this as just to implement your API is a mission, all of this code, right? It's no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to do this. So this is the benefit. Okay, so what I do here is I fetch all the words or all the sentences. I find a random one or random index, and that's the sentence which is displayed on the screen. Okay, I've got a separate section in that application. So I showed you here, this is the app, right? Or the Angular application. Over here, if we go to config/config, it's like a special route that you just need to know about. We can see that we've got the ability to add a new word or a new kind word. And we know that our NPM library has implemented the fetch and the create so far. So in this, not this one, in this component over here, the configure component, when we click on add sentence, then I grab the sentence that's linked to the input, and I just say create kind word, and I get back that sentence. I push it into my list of sentences, and then that should update the data source of my table. So if we go back over here and I type in a new kind word, you are such an amazing person. Okay, so we add that kind word, and we can see here that it has been added. We can see the date that it was created. And if I refresh the page, we can see it keeps on fetching these kind words. It's been stored to the database, which is awesome. Now, remember, we've only created fetch and create. So if I click on remove, what it's doing is it's removing the local in-memory copies of those kind words. So if I refresh the page, they're all back. They're not actually being deleted on the API. So what we're going to do now is we're going to update our NPM library with that new, or with some new features to be able to remove from the server as well. So let's go to our kind word service. We'll close all the other ones. Okay, so in our kind word service, we've got fetch and create. We're going to create a new function, and we're going to call it remove kind word. So we'll make it public because we want it to be called by users of the kind word service. I don't think it needs to be async, but we can add async just in case. And we're just going to call it remove kind word. Okay. Now, if we go back and have a look at our documentation in Swagger, all that's required is the ID of the kind word that we want to remove, the ID of the sentence that we want to remove. Okay, so I'm going to call this one, I just want to actually take in the entire sentence. Oops, sentence. I still can't spell correctly. There we go. And we know that sentence is going to be of type sentence. Okay, so we've already imported sentence, so we know that we just want to remove this sentence. And it's going to return a promise. And the type of the promise will be void. Okay, so we'll just return nothing, but the user will know if the promise resolves successfully, then the kind word was removed. We can put that into the documentation as well. Okay, so we've got remove kind word. We're going to build up the URL. So I'm going to copy this one, but we know that I want to add slash plus the sentence ID. Okay, nice thing about TypeScript is because everything's typed, we can just get access to all the IntelliSense gives us access to all the model variables, which is very nice. Okay, now what we're going to do is just return, we're going to return the promise, okay, and this function that we're implementing is the delete, or the verb, the HTTP verb that we're implementing is the delete one. So I'm going to say this, oopsie, that's not it, this dot HTTP dot delete, that's the verb we're using, and we want to just pass in the URL, which we've already built up. And there we go. That will now implement the delete. Okay, now ready to go, right? I've created done all the changes, so now I can just go npm publish and test it. No, first thing we're going to do is run local tests. Okay, let's test it locally before we publish it, make sure that everything is working, and then we can go ahead and publish it. So remember I talked about having a staging environment, or staging environment of your API. This environment over here is my staging environment. So if we go back to CodeCapsules, we can go back to the testing space or the staging space, and we can have a look at this kind words API that's running. And this is the link to the staging API, or to the, it says error cannot get, it is running. So if we just go /API/sentence, there we go, you're getting back all the correct data. So the API is running, and notice that, or this is the link. So it's this one, DNENY. So this is my staging API. Good. So first thing we do is we import kind word service. We initialize it to point to our test URL, or a base test URL. Okay, we've already got tests for fetch, and we've got a test for create. So we do the fetch of the kind words, and we expect sentences to be defined. Then we create a kind word, and we say, "You're looking so lovely today." And that's the kind word that gets passed in, and that should give us back a sentence which should be defined. Great. Next thing we're going to do is create a test for our delete function. So we'll say test, and we're going to say test delete kind word. Okay. The function is going to be async because we want to wait for it. Okay. And we are going to do a try catch. Oops. We'll just log the errors if we get them. And inside here, we'll do our work. So in order to delete a kind word, we have to have the kind word itself. Okay, so we'll first fetch the kind words. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say const sentences, oops, is equal to, that's not const sentences equal to await, come on man, await kind words, which is my service name, dot, and we've just written this function. Oh, we want to fetch them first, so we're going to fetch the kind words first. And that should give us some kind words over here. The next thing we want to do is we want to say const, or we want to just remove the first one. So we'll say, we know we should have one because this gets run first, which will add one, and then we should have at least one. So I'm going to just say sentences dot, or sentences at item 0, and that's the one that I'm going to remove, just the first one. So I'm going to say const sentence. Technically, we don't need that. I could pass this in as a parameter, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. And we're just going to wait, what is it called? Kind words dot remove kind word, and we'll pass in our sentence that we want to remove. Okay, so at this point, we should expect this to run. So expect how do you do? Notice that I'm not so great with jest. I don't know how to say expect this point to be reached. Expect sentence to be defined. Okay, this should run. It should reach this point. So the sentence will be defined at this point. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and test this. So I'm now going to say npm run, which is now going to run a script in my package.json. So one of those scripts is test. So I'm just going to say npm run test. Oops. I hope I didn't change anything here. Okay, good. npm run test. And boom, we got an error. That's good. So it says cannot read properties undefined ID. So when we're trying to delete, there is an issue. Now, this is why we test our applications, right? So we make sure that it says that they're all passed, which is a bit weird considering we got an error, but anyway. It's probably because it caught the error. Kind word service. So I think the issue is over here. Let's try this. If we put this into a debug environment and we put a breakpoint over here, let's see what happens. Oops. Oh, okay. Maybe we just console log and check if we get. console.
So what I usually do is so I put the try and catch. I don't put the expect inside my try and catch. Because theoretically, because you're catching that error, it's not getting thrown up.
Yes.
So the only time I actually just do a try and catch in a test is actually if I'm actually trying to test an error state. So something that I know. Yeah. So you're actually preventing that error from failing by actually catching it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. As mentioned already, this is why I was testing live because I'm not super clued up with Jest. So that's one of my own shortcomings that I need to work on. So we'll update this to get rid of the try catches then. Thanks for that insight there, Skulk.
No worries. Oh, that's also why you're the CEO and I'm the contractor. It's because these are the type of problems that I deal with. Type of problems that you deal with is more strategic in nature.
Okay, so we get undefined logged. So for some reason, fetching kind words is not working. Do I have to do this inside
But
the test?
at least the test now fails as it should. Each test, I don't think your tests, you might need to run that as there's a before test setup method that you can call. And like, I think, so what is that doing? Initialize.
It's not an asynchronous function.
So what exactly does kind words initialize do? Also, live debugging. Like, here you guys go.
Yeah, this is real.
What does that do exactly?
It just sets a variable inside my service. A private variable.
Okay, I see. It might be possible that you need to run that before every test.
That's
because
fine.
so I think the thing is, like, alternatively, you might need to run that in like a setup. There's a method to set that up for the test.
Okay.
Yeah, before each. There you go. So Daniel mentioned it.
Before each?
Yeah. No, before each. There's a before each method that you can call. Also, fetch mock. Does it mock indefinitely? Because sometimes, like, I don't use fetch mock. I just actually use my own dependency injection to test my to mock things. But does that like, is it able to fire indefinitely? Or
I don't
would
know.
it actually? Because it
I've
might
put it
also
in
be that
before each
only
as
mocks
well.
once.
Well, let's see if that works.
Okay.
Still failing.
So in that case, okay, so where's that? Let's see if we can maybe solve that in like 5 minutes. Otherwise, we can just continue.
We can move on. Yeah, I can publish it.
Ah,
It should work.
So
It
there,
should work.
fetch kind
It's
words,
just
await,
mocking.
async, sentences, and sentences. What is that? Is that also undefined? If you console log that.
Question.
Might very well be that it maybe returns a object or something.
Undefined as well. So I suspect that the mock is not working.
Yeah. But like, I'm of limited use here because I tend to, as mentioned, I tend to just, I don't mock the APIs per se. I actually have dependencies that I just replace by means of dependencies. So I would just abstract that behind something like, mock or get word or whatever. which should just be a
Right.
thin wrapper, and I just replaced that when I'm testing.
Okay.
Another thing that you can look at, by the way, is there's something called service worker mock or something, which actually just like physically intercepts the API call. I don't know how well that translates to jest, but I know a lot of people use that as well. But yeah, regardless, I've also found that mocking fetch requests can be a pain.
Yeah, let's pretend at this point that it works.
Just say expect true to be true. I've written a couple of those tests. Or let me say, I have not, but hypothetically, if I wanted to be lazy and get a test to pass, I would just say expect true to be true. There you go.
So this will hopefully get it to work, because 2 passed, 1 failed. Yeah. So let's assume we got the mocking working. I will get it working post this presentation, and then send you guys the updated code or update the repos. But just for demonstration purposes, let's run the test and get them all running, and then we can publish. And then I know this function will work. It's just a mocking issue. Okay, there we go. Wonderful. By the way, if your tests fail, NPM won't publish your package. So now that we've got our tests working, let's go to package.json, bump the version. Okay, and then we can say.
So
NPM.
maybe like while I'm here, this is maybe a good like there was a question earlier by Stuart. Let me actually just bring that up. So like this is a great question. So he asked, bumping the version via package.json sounds error prone. Are there other ways to do this? And 100%. Like I also maintain a couple of like open source NPM packages, and like the amount of time I have actually committed it and it actually never updated, or I didn't bump the version in there. And I only realized like 2 months later. And because this is open source stuff, so it's not, I don't have a direct line of communication with the person that's using it. So they can't go like, Skulk, where's the update? Whoever's using the open source stuff don't even know there's an update. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. This is, to me, it's annoying, but it hasn't been painful enough to actually push me to find a different way of doing it. But it's definitely annoying.
So personally, I've never used a library which will help me with that, because you can't. The thing with NPM is it will actually reject you if your package version hasn't been bumped. So I haven't run into this issue, and it is a bit of a pain when you've got to go change the version. It's kind of like you'll go through the process of you'll try and deploy or try and publish. It will say rejected because this version already exists, and then you go, oh, okay, and then you'll change the version and publish again. So it's not too much of an issue with NPM package publishing. However, I'm sure there's a way that you can do that with a pre-publish function. So there might be some way to do pre-publish and then in here change the version, but I'm not sure. I haven't actually.
I've previously also considered just actually writing a node script that just reads it, because it's a JSON file, so you can just read it, parse it, bump that specific property, and write it back. But sure, that to me feels a bit gross, and maybe intentionally so. I think maybe like the NPM team is deliberately making it like having you err on the side of accidentally not publishing something you intended to publish, instead of actually accidentally publishing something you never intended to publish. Because like you can't, once something's out there, like you can only release a new version. You can't get, so if you publish like sensitive information or whatever. So I think maybe intentionally they're making it harder. But yeah, for what it's worth, I share that annoyance.
Yeah, I suspect so. So just so that everyone's aware of what was going on, it rejected my previous publish because I wasn't logged in. I intentionally logged out and I forgot that I had to show you the login process. So all I've done now is I typed in npm login. Then it just asked me for my username and my password. And then it asked for me for my email address. I put in the email address, it sent me an OTP. This is that OTP. I just got the email. I can show you what that email looks like as well. This is what it looks like. Gives you the OTP. And then we whack enter. And now we're logged in. So if I type npm publish again, it should go ahead and actually publish this time. Note my 3 tests have passed. Okay, great. So now it says kind words has been bumped to version 2. So if we go back here, we can see it's on kind words version 1. By the way, you get an email as well saying that it's successfully bumped. Okay. If I refresh over here, we now see version 2 is published. Okay, great. Now, if I go to my Angular application, we go to the package.json and we just have a look here. Version 2 should now be available. So let's update to version 2. We'll type in, oopsie, npm install to fetch that version. Good. And now we can go, actually, I should have shown you, but that doesn't really matter. This kind words function over here. Notice this is that remove function. When we click on the button to remove, it calls on remove sentence, which at this point just updates the in-memory sentences, but we want to remove from the server. So we're going to take our kind words library, and we'll just say .remove kind word, which this function is now available to us because we've installed the new version of our package. And we can pass in the sentence we want to remove. We can wait for that to, oopsie, wait for that to run. If I say npm start, this will start a local version of Angular on my machine. Okay, and we can go to localhost 4200 for Angular. We'll go to /config. Good. And now, hopefully, when we click remove, it removes. If I refresh the page, it stays removed because it's actually removed from the server. So let's test that again. Add a kind word, refresh. Cool, remove it. And it's been removed. We can have a look at the network. So the function worked, it just, the mocking wasn't working for some reason. So if we just do test, we add the kind word, it's actually talking to my server, because in my Angular application, in the module, I import the kind words library and I initialize it with the environment API variables, right? Or API endpoint, or the API's based URL, and then all of these functions work from there. So I can click remove, and we can see that this is going to the server as well, the delete function. Okay, so unfortunately, the testing didn't work, but yeah, that's really the long and the short of NPM packages or writing your own one. It's nice to start with a nice template. Start with the template over here, this one, fork it, update package.json, update application details or the application integration, update the tests. If we'll come up with a better way of marking, and I'll update the template with that as well. And then you can publish your applications. now that I've made this final change on the local environment, if we go and have a look at the one on the server, where is it? This one. So this one is still running on the not updated one because I've only done that on the local environment, right? So if I stop this, git status, git add, oopsie, triple D as well, yeah, git commit, what was it? I push origin main. Okay, so now I've just pushed those changes. CodeCapsules will detect those changes if we go to the capsule, and it will start a new build. We can see here that build is started. And once, because this Angular application is actually linked to this Angular code, so CodeCapsules has got git push detection, so it will detect that a new commit has been pushed. It will automatically start building and redeploy those changes. Cool. And that's it. That is how you write NPM packages. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a ton. So as always, you guys are, the rest of you are welcome to like write any questions in the text chat, and I will just pop them up on the screen here. But yeah, I'm more than happy to just dive into it. I have a couple.
Cool.
What would you say would be the benefit of actually like internally in a team? So I think there's kind of a distinction between I killed your screen, so you can bring that up now if you want. I saw a little hint of the text chat there poking out. So one thing that like, no, I don't necessarily always have an answer for this, but so obviously you get open source NPM packages, which is, makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Because like you don't know the context that's going to like be used in and so forth, so you do npm install. But then like there's kind of internal, as you mentioned, like, so let's say you're a company and you're building an app, and that nice words is a single microservice or part of that app. What would be the benefit of actually publishing that as an npm package, as opposed to just actually including it in the repo itself as kind of a module?
That's a very good question. And I would say that the nice thing about an npm package is it's already a nicely contained environment, right? So if you have some code which exists in a repository somewhere, you would have to copy it from that repository, put it into the into this place, and then you've got potentially different versions of the same code, right? So if I have it in 3 different applications, and I change the main repo saying, okay, this is now up to date with the latest of the repo, you can now version your npm package alongside the versioning of your API. So when the API changes, you bump the npm package, and then you deploy those together. So then you could have a very mismatched changes. So like now you have to go back, recopy it across, redo all that work, instead of just going to package.json in your application, changing the version of the npm package, typing npm install, and then you've got all those changes immediately. So I think,
That's true. Yeah. That's a very good point, because obviously my context is mostly in the world of design systems and stuff. So it's very rare that there's a big mismatch between, even if you're using a design system across like several platforms or channels. Generally, when like you kind of update the design system, most of the actual code bases or whatever pull in the new one almost immediately. So that I guess that's true. Yeah, like when you're working with like more kind of an actual service, there might be various reasons why there are different versions being used across different products.
yeah,
Okay. All right. That's super interesting. Have you, which maybe leads into the next question. Do you have any experience with monorepos at all?
yeah, I do. And
Cool.
what I found with monorepos is you end up writing a lot more code than you need to, because there might be some microservice which does the job you're trying to do a lot simpler, but because you've gone down the route of a monorepo, or do you mean a monorepo or all of the microservices in
So,
one
so, so,
repo?
so, what I effectively mean, like in terms of a monorepo, is so. And once again, like our kind of context might be a bit different here, because I mostly work in the kind of the front end JavaScript space, whereas you kind of work more within the API space and so forth. So, what I mean by monorepo, so if you look at, for example, something like material design or whatever, so on NPM they are kind of prefaced by at material, or
Yes.
like. So, and then it's like a kind of, so it's a like, so that's genuine indication that there's a big repo that has all these packages in, and like they are just like they're not each, there's not a 1-to-1 ratio between packages and repos. And the other thing
Yeah.
is like, so but there's some tooling like Learner and whatever that actually makes that more manageable. So you have one big repo with all your kind of packages in, and you can individually update them and publish them, and you can also like
Yes.
run a test, and it tests all of your packages instead of like
Yes.
having to clone different repos and whatever.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's a very good question, and
Mm.
the answer has changed to no now.
Is it?
But there's a caveat there. We are looking into that monorepo style of working with microservices,
Mm.
because I think a lot of the time microservices that exist under the same sort of suite of services, they can
Mm.
be combined into a monorepo and they can be combined together. However, the APIs themselves, the actual microservices, I think those should be distinct and they
Mm.
should be isolated and exist on their own. The reason being, it's easier to manage them that way.
Mm.
What the reason you want to do the monorepo for the NPM packages would be because it makes the developer experience better for the
Yeah.
person that's consuming this library. But then for your own internal team, I think it's better to have those microservices separated
Yeah.
on the API
Yeah.
side.
Like yeah, just without any tooling. So there is tooling that kind of helps ease that, but I do get you. Like as a sort of base experience, it's definitely a bit more of a pain.
Yeah,
Because I think just like having multiple packages or JSONs in subfolders, already things start, and then there are like kind of specific dependencies that don't play that well when you have more than one package JSON and so forth. No, I 100% get that.
yeah, yeah,
But once again, I think also like the type of things that I do, it works really well, because it's helpful for me, to have everything in one place, instead of having a separate repo for, okay, here's all the theming stuff, and here's all the button
yeah,
stuff, and here's the so I guess it depends on, but yeah, there are trade-offs, and I think at the end of the day it comes down to personal preference. Yeah. So another thing I also wanted to ask is GitHub packages. Have you played around with them at all? Used them? I am a bit ignorant in terms of them. I haven't delved into it at all. Let me put it this way: since my daughter is about a year old now, and I actually haven't had much time to work on any open source with a 1-year-old baby. But I know like a lot of people are saying really good things about GitHub packages. I don't know if you have any experience with that.
Personally, no, I haven't.
Okay.
Mickey might be able to weigh in on that. I think he might have played around there, but I haven't personally. So sorry, I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah, I also know one thing that some people are also doing, and this, I guess this just comes down to preference, is you can actually include the GitHub repo URL in your package.json, and it pulls directly from that.
Sure.
To me, that feels a bit like there's a bit too much room there for like typos and whatever. But Mickey says he also haven't.
Okay.
But okay, yeah. So I don't want to speak too much on that and reveal my ignorance. But it is a bit of a pain having NPM in the mix as well. So I'd imagine if you can just do all of that in GitHub, like it would just ease it a bit in terms of the publishing and the version control.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about NPM is that it's quite nice and managed, right? So
Yeah.
it's very particular with its version control. I guess you would have the same thing with GitHub commits, but it seems too easy to just commit push versus when you publish, you've got an more easily readable version number instead of just a commit ID. And rolling back to a particular version is nice and easy with NPM. And it's already an ecosystem which is established compared to GitHub repositories. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What is it? GitHub packages. We'll see. Maybe it does have legs. We'll see where it goes.
And maybe maybe I should take this opportunity to actually spend some time after this looking, just like a 10-minute look into, because I've seen it a couple of times and I actually don't know what it entails. I don't know if it's maybe just a wrapper around NPM or it's like something, a complete alternative to NPM. But so which I guess also brings me to the next question. Have you played around with actually using GitHub Actions to deploy to NPM before?
Also not.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and so you can. There's a couple of pre-written ones. Ones that I've had a lot of success with is like you actually just you check for something specific in the commit. So you say like release or whatever, and then like it either you say release 0.4 or whatever, and then it actually triggers a GitHub action that deploys it to NPM for you, or you just say release or whatever. Or you can even use GitHub tags. I'm not a fan of using tags in Git, but you can even use tags or whatever. Just tell it to actually run that build. And either include it in the indication itself, or have it look at the package.json and then just deploy the version from there. I've had a lot of success with that. But I don't know whether that's just me, like kind of just enjoying setting up almost like a continuous integration process with NPM and GitHub, or whether it's actually saving me that much time above just going like NPM like publish. But
yeah, it sounds very interesting. I haven't looked at it. I can look into it a bit further and maybe in a future talk more about it.
Are you guys using private NPM packages at CodeSpace? Not CodeSpace, CodeCapsules?
No, not private, because what we are wanting to build, what our roadmap is moving towards, is we want to build. Well, with our platform, we allow you to easily scale, spin up new instances of your APIs and your projects and whatever, right? So you saw I had staging environments and a prod environment of the same API, and all I need to do to update it is just git push, and all of them pull that, redeploy, rebuild, and everything. So with that in mind, what we want to build is a feature which allows developers to take their code and sell it on CodeCapsules. So, or
I see.
use CodeCapsules as the development space. So what we want to do is have what we'll call the CodeCapsules marketplace. Cloud, we want to call it the cloud native marketplace, where you have some sort of microservice, and then you don't need to worry about the distribution of that service, and rather just you use focus on your code. We'll take care of the distribution and the selling of your product. Then when people come to CodeCapsules, they can just spin up an instance of your service at the click of a button. And so we want to start off with a few microservices of our own on that platform as like a starting point. So all of our services have been, or all of our NPM packages have been public because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of almost like it's kind of so you're effectively reselling software as a service.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're giving developers the platform to sell it.
Yeah. Well, what I mean, but obviously not just taking what they have, but I mean obviously handling all the infrastructure and whatever.
Yes.
But I think effectively it's kind of like a marketplace then for software as a service. Oh, that's interesting.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, but more developer focused, because we don't want it to be very kind of like the microservice architecture. It could well be SaaS as it is, as we sort of know it today. But we want developers to have especially smaller developers. Like if you, for example, want to write your own service and you think it's brilliant, but you don't want to have to write all of the infrastructure around it, which is what you have to do these days. You can just write your cool little service, put it as available, almost like an NPM package in a way. But it'll be a CodeCapsules.
Hey, anything that saves me from having to log into AWS's user interface is a win in my books. As far as possible, I don't care even if I have to use the command line. Just as far as possible, if I can not look at the AWS interface and not have to deal with that. Oh man, I did so much.
It's terrible.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you deliberately, if you were to have packages, they would be public.
Yes.
Okay, because I'd be curious what the kind of the pricing structure is like in terms of private NPM packages and so forth.
Yeah, I did have a look at it. I think it's based on users. So the more users you have available in the team that wants to deploy a repository or deploy a package, the more you pay. Which is similar to a lot of them. They're all, a lot of these use user-based pricing.
Yeah, and so I'd also be curious whether there are any alternatives where it maybe takes a bit of kind of configuration, and it's not as easy as npm install, but it kind of allows you to kind of do the same. Because I can imagine it can get quite pricey pretty quickly. Given that that's probably where NPM makes their money. So they're probably in the enterprise space. So they're probably these type of services, usually when it's free for the majority of people, and there's a small group of people that are actually subsidizing it, those people are paying big money. Okay.
But they offer a lot of value, I suppose.
No, 100%. 100%. And they have that money to throw around. Yeah. If you're Microsoft or you're Google or, Stripe or whoever.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks so much. This was really insightful. I really appreciated this. If people want to reach out to you, kind of any extra questions or maybe follow what you're doing, where can they get in touch with you?
Awesome. I do have a final slide, which just says,
let me just share that. Well, there you guys go. Awesome. All right.
So you can mail me or just LinkedIn both are great.
And you're just full-time doing the Appstrax and the CodeCapsule stuff.
Yeah. So full-time on Appstrax and CodeCapsules. And that's sort of my role.
Awesome. Okay. So Cool. Thanks so much for sharing this with us. Everyone else, thanks for joining. It is the end of the year, so actually, I usually find there's a big uptick in the beginning of the year where people are like, okay, this is the year I'm really gonna upskill or whatever. And then it kind of fades off a bit through the year. But yeah, thanks everyone who's still here. Thanks so much, Jacque, and the rest of the CodeCapsules team.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome to be here, and the opportunity to present is good. It's also a learning curve for me. It's the first time I presented on one of these meetup platforms, so I was a little bit nervous, but thanks for listening and bearing with my errors in the code.
No, it was great. Okay, cool. Cheers, everyone. Have a great evening.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.